This is the first part of a two-part tutorial on how to make a responsive two-level sidebar using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We won't be using any frameworks, just vanilla JavaScript and regular CSS, no preprocessors. In this part, we'll focus on creating a sliding drawer that will eventually hold our sidebar. What we have here right now is just a placeholder. The final sidebar will have two levels, with submenus that can fold and unfold. Here's how our drawer looks on a mobile screen. We've got a hamburger icon, and when you click on it, the drawer opens. The icon transforms into a cross, and clicking it again slides the drawer back in. So, you can open and close the drawer easily. I think it's pretty cool. On desktop, we'll have the same sidebar, but it will stay open by default, no sliding in or out, until we get to a point where it becomes hidden for smaller screens. Now let's talk a bit about the overall approach. My goal is to make the menu responsive while minimizing the changes the user has to deal with. It's essentially the same sidebar on both mobile and desktop, with no shift from horizontal to vertical like some menus do. I don't think that's necessary. The fewer changes, the better. I've seen some folding sidebars that shrink to just icons and collapse the menu text. But honestly, I don't think that's ideal. When you only see icons, you have to guess what they mean. So, people tend to add tooltips, but that feels like extra work. Why bother with tooltips when you had clear menu text to begin with? To keep things simple, I decided against collapsing the sidebar. My first idea was to make the sidebar span the full width of the screen, but that would have meant putting the close button inside the sidebar, which felt inconsistent. It would be outside when the sidebar is closed, but jump inside when it's open. I don't like elements moving around like that. So instead, I decided to leave the toggle button in the same place, right next to the edge of the sidebar, and keep the sidebar the same width on both desktop and mobile screens. So, today we're going to build a sliding drawer for mobile screens, which will become a static sidebar on desktop. Let's dive in. We start by moving to a folder called Mango Drawer that will contain our project. Then, we open Visual Studio Code. In this project, we will create three main files: index.html, style.css, and app.js. In the index.html file, we link to the style sheet in the JavaScript file. We're using the defer attribute in the script tag so that the JavaScript will run only after all the HTML content has been loaded. Now, we create the style.css and app.js files. To check if everything is set up correctly, we add some content to the index.html file and open it in Live Server. Then, in style.css, we change the background color of the page to red. In app.js, we add a simple alert message. When we see the background turn red and the alert appear, we know that both the CSS and JavaScript files are linked properly. After verifying that everything is working, we remove the test code and move on. Next, we create a basic layout in the index.html file. We add some placeholder text like Hello World, example heading, and Lorem Ipsum to represent several cards on the page. In the style.css file, we import the Poppins font from Google Fonts and define some global CSS variables for basic colors that we'll use throughout the project. We also apply a simple reset to remove default margins and paddings from different browsers. We style the body with the Poppins font and add some padding at the top to make space for the toggle button we'll add later. We also add styles for containers and paragraphs. When we open the document again, we can see nice, white cards displayed on a light gray background. Now that our basic HTML document page is ready, we'll move on to adding a sliding panel on the left side of the page. Let's try to describe what we are trying to build here. We are planning to do it like this. We will have a sliding panel placed just outside of our page. There will be a hamburger button that opens and closes this sliding panel. The panel will initially be positioned at -250 pixels, and it will slide in like this from left to right. Next, when the sliding panel is fully in, it will be positioned here at 0 pixels. And there will be a close button right here. After that, you'll be able to slide it out by clicking on this button. This is our plan, so let's get coding. Okay, let's go back to our code. This is where we ended up last time. We have our main area that contains our HTML. Right above it, we're going to add this. We will create a toggle button and give it an ID. We will provide some ARIA attributes. ARIA is an acronym for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It is a standard to make applications more accessible for people with vision disabilities. ARIA tags describe what sections of the site are currently visible, which buttons expand certain widgets, etc. We will be using ARIA tags in our CSS and JavaScript as well, so we are not going to create custom classes like open or anything. This is actually a hamburger button, and this number that you see here is the Unicode number for the hamburger symbol. Next, we will go to the sidebar. This is our sliding panel, and we will have 3 menu items there. And that's about it for this part. Let's go to the CSS file now. First, we'll provide some additional CSS variables, sidebar width and sidebar background. The width of the sidebar will be 250 pixels. The toggle button padding describes how much the toggle button is shifted relative to the top left corner of the page. Then, we will go to the end of this file and provide some styles for the sidebar and the toggle button. The sidebar will be in a fixed position at the top of the page. When it is hidden, it will be at -250 pixels to the left of the page. That means it is off the page, but right next to it. It will take all the available height. For now, we will give it a dark background, as it is easier to see this way. Eventually, we will change it to the white color. We will set a high z-index since it is supposed to be on top of the main content. And we will horizontally center our menu placeholder. This is an important part, and it shows how to use ARIA attributes. It specifies that when the sidebar is visible, ARIA hidden is false. The left side of the sidebar is aligned with the left edge of the page. Now, we will go to the toggle button. It is also in a fixed position, but we will move it a bit from the top left corner. Cursor pointer means the mouse pointer will change to index finger to indicate that this button is clickable. We will also set a high Z index and center align the content. The transition is set up the same as for the sidebar. So, when the sidebar slides out, the toggle button will also slide out in the same manner. Outline None removes the border around the button when it is active or has focus. When the sidebar is visible, the toggle button should be positioned next to its top. That means 250 pixels to the left with some extra padding. Now, we need to describe how our page will behave on mobile and desktop screens. On mobile, the sidebar is hidden by default and positioned at -250 pixels. When the sidebar is open, meaning not hidden, the left position will be 0. The toggle button is supposed to be visible on mobile and invisible on desktop. Our main content is positioned normally, starting from the left side of the page. On desktop, the sidebar is always visible. Transition None means we don't want any animations. Next, we are hiding the toggle button. And the main content is supposed to be positioned to the right of the sidebar. So, we are shifting it to the right by the sidebar width. Let's take a look at what we have now. We do have a hamburger button at the top left of the screen, but when we click on it, nothing happens. The sidebar doesn't slide out. We will fix that in a moment. When we open the page full screen, we can see the panel on the left side, and there is no hamburger button. When we resize the window, the button reappears. Now we will go to our JavaScript file and start writing code here. First, we will get hold of the toggle button and the sidebar. We will get these elements by their IDs. Then we will write a function, showSidebar. It will take a single Boolean parameter. When we call showSidebar true, it will show the sidebar, and when we call showSidebar false, it will close it. Basically, we are just setting ARIA attributes here to the appropriate values. When the sidebar is shown, the ARIA expanded attribute of the toggle button is supposed to be true, and the ARIA hidden attribute of the sidebar is supposed to be false, and vice versa. To be able to call this function from our JavaScript console in Google Developer Tools, we will attach it to the window object. Now let's go to the JavaScript console and try to call this function manually. As expected, when we execute showSidebar true, the sidebar slides out, and when we call showSidebar false, the sidebar slides back in. Now we need to connect this function to our toggle button. First, we will write a function sidebar is open that returns a Boolean. It simply checks whether the ARIA expanded attribute on the toggle button is set to true. Then we will write a function toggle sidebar. It will open the sidebar when it is closed and close the sidebar when it is open. Now we will add an event listener for the click event on our toggle button. So when the button is clicked, the toggle sidebar function will be called. And now, as you can see, when we click on the button, the sidebar slides out. And when we click on it again, it slides back in. This is absolutely marvelous. Now I want to show you a couple of ARIA attributes that the toggle button has. ARIA expanded shows whether the sidebar is open or not, and ARIA control states that this button controls the sidebar. We also need to express whether the toggle button itself is visible or not, so there must be an ARIA hidden attribute on the button. But since I don't know whether the user is on a mobile device or a desktop, I cannot set the value of this ARIA hidden attribute in the HTML. It needs to be done in JavaScript. This function is called init sidebar ARIA attributes, and it basically sets up the values of several ARIA attributes the way they're supposed to be for both mobile and desktop clients. If the window width is less than 768 pixels, the toggle button is visible and the sidebar is closed. If we are on desktop, the toggle button is hidden and the sidebar is open. We need to call this function when we open our page to set the initial state. We also need to handle the situation when the user resizes his browser. For example, if he reduces the window width to less than 768 pixels, the function should be triggered as well. Now let's try again. We can open and close the sidebar on mobile. Then we open the window full screen and the sidebar is there. If we make the window wider or narrower, the sidebar shows up and disappears properly. Everything seems to be okay now. In this section, we are going to transform our static hamburger button into a button with a fancy animation effect. This is what we are looking for. Originally, we have a hamburger button. When you click on this button, sliding panel opens and the toggle button turns into a cross or a multiplication sign. Then you can close the sidebar and the icon goes back to the hamburger icon. Let me explain how it is done. We will actually draw the hamburger icon with 3 lines. When the sidebar is expanded, the middle line of the hamburger icon becomes transparent, and the first and third line slide into the middle position while rotating around the center of the line at the same time. One line is rotated 45 degrees, and the other is rotated minus 45 degrees. That's how they form a cross. Now, we're going to do it using only CSS. Let's make some changes to our HTML file first. Here, we have our hamburger button, which is presented as a Unicode symbol. We need to replace it with 3 lines. We will have 3 spans of class icon bar. These spans will actually be styled as lines, and the background of the spans will be the color of the lines. We set the display property of icon bar to block and define some width and height. We also set up the margin, which defines the distance between the lines. The background color is set to be the same as our text color, and we define a transition for the animation effect. When a line receives focus or is hovered upon, it turns black. When the sidebar is expanded, the position of the first and last icon bar becomes absolute. The first icon bar rotates 45 degrees. The second one becomes transparent. And the third line rotates minus 45 degrees. Now let's take a look. Right now, our icon bars look like this. They are not stacked, but positioned horizontally, one after another. To fix this, we need to change flex direction to column. Let's go back to our page. And now it looks fine. If we click on the icon, the lines slowly transform into a cross. This is the look we were after. Let's take a look at what we have now. Right now, our sidebar has a dark background, but I want to make it white because I like it better. So, we're going to change this, and you can consider it an example of customization. When the sidebar is white, there won't be enough contrast between the sidebar and the cards here, which also have a white background. They will blend together. So, we are going to darken the background area when the sidebar is open. And this is our plan for this section. We start with style.css. we change the sidebar background to white, and the menu items on the sidebar need to have the same color as the text. Now we see our sidebar, and it is white. The problem is that the sidebar and cards on the page merge visually because both of them are white. So, I want to darken the whole page background when the sidebar is open. This will add more contrast between the sidebar and the surrounding area. First, we create an overlay element that covers the entire page. This overlay will be darkened when the sidebar is expanded. The position of this overlay is fixed. It is located at the top left corner and covers the entire body of the web page. We give it a semi-transparent background, but hide it for now by setting the opacity to 0. The overlay will be positioned above the content, but below the sidebar. We make sure it is clickable only when visible, and we set up a transition for the opacity change. The overlay has a darken class. When the overlay is darkened, the opacity is 1, not 0.5 as before, but 1. To allow user interaction with this area, like mouse clicks, we set pointer events to auto. Now we need to go to our JavaScript file. First of all, we get the overlay element by its ID. Then we modify the show sidebar function so that the overlay receives the class darkened when the sidebar is shown, and this class is removed when the sidebar is hidden. Basically, here we add and remove the darken class from the class list. So when the sidebar is visible, the overlay becomes darkened, and when the sidebar is hidden, we remove the darken class. There is another place where we need to remove the darkened class. When our page is initialized, it is not supposed to have this darkened overlay. So, we go to our init sidebar ariatrix function and remove the darkened class there. And that's probably it. Now, let's take a look at how it works. Now we have a sidebar with a white background. The toggle button is too dark, by the way. But as you can see, the overlay here is darkened and provides a great deal of contrast between the page itself and the sidebar. So, let's change the color of the sidebar toggle button to the light gray page background. As you remember, the lines of the cross icon are formed by spans with the icon bar class. When the sidebar is open, we need to change the color of the first and last lines to our base color. Now our close button is white and quite visible. And when it turns into the hamburger icon, it becomes dark again. Nice! There are a couple of other things that I would like to do here. I would like to be able to close the sidebar by clicking on this dark and visible overlay area. Right now, it doesn't work, but if a person clicks here, the sidebar is supposed to close. To do this, we need to add a function that will be triggered by the click event on the overlay element. It's pretty simple. We want to say that if the sidebar is open, hide the sidebar. The second thing is that I would like the user to be able to close the sidebar by pressing the escape button. We add an event listener to the key down event. If the event key is escape and the sidebar is open, we will close the sidebar. Let's try it. Here I am pressing escape and the sidebar is closing. As a result, we have a responsive white sidebar with some temporary menu items. When it opens, the page background is darkened. Our close button for the sidebar is light, but the hamburger button that opens it is dark. When we click outside the sidebar, it closes. When we press the escape button, the sidebar also closes. On the desktop version of the page, we have enough contrast and it looks quite nice. We now have a sliding drawer, and there are multiple implementations of this. However, our final goal is to make a responsive sidebar menu. In the next tutorial, we will create a 2-level vertical folding menu and place it in this sliding drawer area. Eventually, it could be used as a main navigation for any website. So, please check out my next tutorial.